Hey, Michael.
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing? Glad to have you back on the show.
Well, thanks for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. It's you're so informative and very knowledgeable, and it's always, like I say, a great pleasure to have you on. And
Yeah, I really appreciate the platform you've created and the following you have. And it's a place for people to share concerns and to exchange ideas and information is the best we can make out where we're at in this unfolding story. So yeah, happy to be part of it.
yeah, and it's the ongoing saga of what's going on with the Canada Disability Benefit. I had a couple guest speakers on, before the last couple weeks, and I said, well, where's the bill? I had,
Yeah.
and that's so many people are just suffering it across the country right now, and they're desperate to know like what's happening with it because so far it just seems to be kind of empty gestures with it. Just wondering if you have any updates on what you're hearing out there.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of expectation and speculation, and I think that unfortunately the lack of any real explicit mention of the Canada Disability Benefit in the recent federal budget earlier in April, not surprisingly, fueled further concern and anxiety about what's the status of the proposed Canada Disability Benefit, what's the status of the expected bill to be tabled in the House, and the fact that there was not a word specifically mentioning the Canada Disability Benefit. There was, of course, in the budget some things around employment investments, but not a word about the CDB. And so, of course, you've got Green Party MP Mike Morris continuing to lead a brave and very positive campaign to get the bill tabled in the House as soon as possible. And I've got no inside track on that, Brent, but the sense I'm hearing is that it could be in the next week or so. No one's made any specific mention. I know that there's an upcoming major congress or conference around disability inclusion that the federal government is sponsoring next month in May, and I would think that either before that or at that the Minister Carla Qualtrough would have announced the tabling of the bill, or that it would be already in the House. So, the House of Commons is sitting this week, and it's sitting for the next, I think, first 3 weeks of May. So I think I would predict that sometime in May we'll see the bill tabled, if not later this week, but probably in the next week or so we'll see the bill tabled. But of course, to remind your listeners, the previous time a bill was tabled, which was last June, before the last federal election, it's what's called a framework bill. So it's kind of a skeleton without much of the details or the beef or the meat or the flesh on it. So a lot of the questions that your listeners will have, and a lot of people that you talk to over the last many months, the questions will still be there as to the details, and a lot of that will be subject to the consultations that are going on right now with disability groups. And of course, the minister's been meeting with her provincial and territorial government counterparts, ministers responsible for disability issues and social services. So that continues on. That's kind of behind the scenes, or not very public, but that's the way federal provincial relations usually are conducted. But there are consultations, and so a lot of the details are still there, so to be decided. And so there's still an opportunity, I think, for social movements like Disability Without Poverty and specific provincial, local, and national disability organizations across the country to have their say, get their message in there, get the preferences they want to see, the specifics they'd like to see in the design of the program. That there's still a chance to have that done. So the bill will get tabled, I think, fairly soon, but that still leaves a lot of questions unanswered.
Yeah, it does, and basically having the bill brought forward will basically give people assurance, knowing that yes, something is now going to be in the works. I mean, all they're hearing from what I'm hearing on the shows and stuff is, well, I mean, people are cautiously optimistic that yeah, it's going to happen, but the question is when. I guess the when is the big question, and having certainty, knowing that the income part, I mean, is great. I mean, for those that can work, I mean, that is fabulous, right?
Right.
But those that can't work shouldn't be left behind. I mean, especially income wise, and then there would be obviously a top up to the current provincial programs across the country. And
yeah, Just to speak, you mentioned about the provincial programs, and as we both know, the single most important income program for many Canadians living with disabilities who need financial support, it's the provincial and territorial social assistance programs or welfare programs, so-called safety net or programs of last resort. We know those are inadequate everywhere. We know they're stigmatizing, and they've all got a lot of historic problems with them. The challenge for the minister federally is to negotiate with her provincial counterparts to make sure that whatever the amount the new Canada Disability Benefit offers, that the benefit is maximized right through, so there's no clawbacks. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to see any offsets or clawbacks by any provincial or territorial government. And given that different provinces have different political parties in power, different ideologies or philosophies, different provinces are facing different financial or budgetary challenges and needs and so forth. That's as ever thus in Canadian politics. So there's a conversation there that needs to continue about making sure that the federal benefits flows right through to whoever is intended to receive it. And then secondly, to make sure that there's no unintended negative impact, so that receiving the benefit, even if it's not clawed back, doesn't then inadvertently or intentionally in some cases by some provinces, but doesn't inadvertently disenfranchise that person who receives the new federal supplement from access to transit support or housing or other access to other health or related social services or supports that they may be getting from a provincial Ministry of Health or Social Services or community support. So that's part of the when we say the devil in the details, that's some of the details that have to be really thought through. And of course, every province has a different package or mix of programs and supports and services and eligibility rules, et cetera, et cetera. So to make sure that the benefit gets to everybody that it's intended to do, that people get the full amount that's being issued by the Government of Canada. There's no clawbacks, taxbacks, or offsets. And then secondly, it doesn't then put that person, if their income's going up because of the supplement, doesn't then knock them out of being able to access other supports and services that have been crucial to their quality life and everyday living. So this is the first time that these governments have been talking about this seriously for a couple of decades. So they're really kind of having to look at systems that they haven't looked at this way for a long time, Brent. So it's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge to kind of work it through. Yeah, one thing that's kind of tough in this kind of period of time around reform and the expectations and the frustrations and the anger that people are feeling is to also appreciate that Minister Qualtrough is the movement's best champion in the federal government. And they can criticize her, but they also need to express support because she's pushing a file or pushing a reform that's in a very competitive context, whether it's in this last budget, the announcement around dental care, which was a great new initiative. We were talking about pharmacare, another possible social pulse reform in the next year or two, additional money on housing, additional money on healthcare. There's a lot of other far more powerful groups in Canadian society pushing for investments than the disability community. So, we can critique and challenge Minister Qualtrough, but we also need to get behind her and give her support because she needs it. She needs it to get this reform through Cabinet and her caucus and in Parliament. Now, in Parliament, there'll be an opportunity because it's a minority Parliament. There'll be a real opportunity for the other parties, particularly the small but mighty Green Party, but also the NDP and perhaps even the Bloc Québécois. And I wouldn't rule out some of the Conservative MPs either, but they'll want to see whatever proposal the Government of Canada tables in the House of Commons. I think there'll be an expectation that we can do better, either immediately or very soon. And so there'll be an interesting debate to be had within the House of Commons and the parliamentary arena, and not to forget the role of the senators in the upper house chamber. So there'll be an opportunity there, again, because of a minority government, a chance for further discussion and perhaps amendments to the bill to improve it. So there are some real political opportunities once this thing does get tabled. It's also going to be an important signal to the provinces and territorial governments, Brent, that when the bill is tabled, that the government is serious, and the provinces will see that as a commitment. I mean, they know, as you know, we've seen mentions of it in a throne speech and in letters to the minister from the Prime Minister in her mandate letter, but there's nothing, I think, like actually getting the bill tabled in the House and the parliamentary process, the lawmaking process, kick into action. Then that really signals a far more serious intent by the government and by the Parliament of Canada that this program is actually going to happen. And I hope if that bill is tabled in the next few weeks, that sort of starts to address that anxiety. That, well, where's the bill? Let's get the bill going. And so I'm sure it will get tabled.
I just wanted to go back to the employment issue. One important component for me about employment, all of the provinces that have the PWD income assistance program, like here in BC, for example, they say, well, we want PWD to work. And speaking just for myself, like I've worked maybe 25 years, and as a person with a disability, that's actually pretty good, because it's a lot of wear and tear on your body, and so it's a lot to be able to work that much. But the thing I was going to say is one part of employment that is totally disrespected is that the provinces don't respect the privileges that you earn through work, which is primarily pensions, right? Because my first wife passed away, and I've inherited a survivor's pension, and the province claws it back as unearned income, and that to me is just so insulting. It's like here we want you to work, so yeah, go to work. And so I went to work for 25 years, and it's like, yeah, thanks for working. Now we're going to disrespect your earned pension, and it's just so stupid.
Yeah.
And it's like, Brent made the point earlier of, nobody's disabilities are going to go away. Like the disability is still here, but the way the provinces think about it is like they'll say, well, now that you have a survivor's pension, you've got all this extra money, so now we don't have to support your disability anymore.
Yeah. Well, as long as, I think I said this earlier, and you probably well know this too, the number one income program in Canada for people with disabilities is provincial welfare, or provincial, whether you call it PWD or ODSP or whatever province they want to call it, but provincial disability assistance, provincial social welfare is the number one source of income for low-income Canadians with disabilities. That's centuries-old welfare programs. It's got a welfare mentality and philosophy. This idea of we will help you, but you need to be divested and stripped of almost everything else that might help you in your life, and we got to break that. That disregards your rights and your entitlements to other programs that you will perhaps have received and are entitled to receive. And this is not about, quote, protecting the taxpayer from potential abusers. It's a philosophy that's just wrong in the modern world. It offends fundamental principles of human rights and accessibility and inclusion. And that's the bigger battle in all this, is although this is about a federal income supplement, it opens up that whole bigger debate around the role of the provincial programs in all this, because they're the most significant single source of income for low-income people in poverty in this country, and they are still burdened with very old 18th, 19th century beliefs that still are inflicted on you in the 21st century. So that's a huge debate. Again, I know Carla Qualtro's got enough on her plate, but we need to kind of say, Minister, this needs to be part of that conversation with the provinces and insert it into this world of provincial social assistance programs.